Okay, let's start here. By now, you've likely heard all about the controversy, the incredibly stupid controversy surrounding a speech given by Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker at a commencement ceremony for Catholic students at a Catholic school. And he's been viciously condemned by the left, the media, Democrat politicians. The NFL has condemned him. He's been doxxed. He's been threatened. He's been harassed. Just an insane, rabid, vicious, psychotic response from so many people, all because he gave a speech as a Catholic man at a Catholic school to Catholic students where he articulated Catholic teaching. That was the whole speech. It was an excellent speech. He was right about everything he said. And everything he said, again, was totally consistent with Catholic teaching. The idea that there would be any controversy about a Catholic message at a Catholic school is just preposterous. But also not terribly surprising, of course. And meanwhile, as many people have pointed out, there are NFL players who have been charged with domestic abuse and drug possession and assault and so on, and none of them get the kind of treatment that Harrison Butker has gotten for saying a bunch of Catholic stuff at a Catholic commencement speech, where, again, he was hired to go and give his perspective. So there have also been plenty of morons on social media who have said, well, is Harrison Butker going to get drummed out of the league the way that Colin Kaepernick was? What about all the conservatives who told Colin Kaepernick to just shut up and play football? Why aren't they saying the same thing to Harrison Butker? Well, you idiot. It's because there's a few reasons. Number one, Harrison Butker is a star at his position. He's one of the best in the league at his position, which is field goal kicker, which is a very important position on the field. And Colin Kaepernick was way past his prime, was a mediocre bum, and he had already lost his starting job. He was bad. He was bad at playing football, which is like the actual reason why he flunked out of the league, because he couldn't play the game. Nobody wanted to hire him. Now, was he good enough back in whenever it was that he left the league, back in 2015 or 16 or whatever it was? Was he good enough to at least be a backup somewhere, or even a third string, or at least be on a practice squad? Yeah, probably. But he didn't want that job, first of all. And second, the baggage he brought with him was not enough. His talent was not enough to override all of the baggage he brought with him. So that was the problem. If he was more talented, he'd still be in the league now, probably. But the most important distinction between the two, which should be very obvious, is that Colin Kaepernick was using the football field itself during the games to make his political statements. So as a football player on the football field, he was using that as a forum to make political statements. Harrison Butker, in the off season, was invited to a Catholic school as a Catholic man to give his perspective in a speech, and that's what he did. And then there's the third distinction, which is probably the most important, which is that Harrison Butker is right and Colin Kaepernick was wrong about everything he said. So, I think there's enough there to make the distinctions clear. So anyway, a lot of controversy. But then there's one clip, of course, that's gotten by far the most attention, and it's the short portion of the speech where he addresses the women in the crowd. And it is a short portion. The speech is like 20 minutes long, and he spends like a minute, if that, talking to the women in the crowd. And I was looking quickly for a clip of just that part, and this is the only one I found when I was looking quickly. Somebody edited it to put clips of A Handmaid's Tale into the clip of the speech. And I'm going to play this version, actually, because mainly because I want you to hear what he said, but also because actually the Handmaid's Tale imagery, along with what Butker is really saying, only serves to show how absurd the moral panic over his remarks actually is. So let's watch that.
For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
Wow. How terrible. This man deeply loves and appreciates his wife. He actually gets choked up talking about how much he loves his wife. What an awful thing that we should be upset about. I mean, honest to God, if you actually watch the clip, how can you manage to have those kinds of negative emotions watching that? Really? That upsets you? And on top of that, he's daring to tell the women in the audience that family life is good and will bring them joy and fulfillment. What a monster. What a monster this man is. Now, in all seriousness, what is there to be upset about? He doesn't say that no women should ever work outside the home. He didn't say that. He didn't say that homemaker is the most important title of all that anyone could ever have. He said it's one of the most important titles. Is anyone disagreeing with that? You don't even think it's one of? It can't be one of the most important? You're upset about that? Are we allowed to agree? Like women that stay home and raise their kids, they do one of the most important jobs? So if you're upset, then I assume that what you're saying is that it's not even one of the most important. Being a mother and raising your kid is not even, it doesn't belong in that category. It's not even top 5, according to you. Like, to me, that is the radical position, not what he is saying. He doesn't say that women who work outside the home are evil or bad or should be arrested and stoned to death. Okay, he didn't say that. He didn't imply it. He didn't get anywhere close to it. He simply says that most of the Catholic women at a Catholic school will find their greatest calling in family life, which they will. That doesn't even mean that most of them will solely be, mothers and stay-at-home moms, but that most of them will find their greatest calling, will find their greatest vocation in raising families, which is true. And the same could be said of the men. In fact, he does say it about the men. He says it about himself. He says that he wouldn't be who he is without his wife. Is that offensive? Is what he just said about himself offensive to men? Because I can guarantee you something, if he had said the opposite about women, the feminists would be having an even greater conniption fit. What is it? He says about himself? I wouldn't be the man I am today without my wife. What if he had said, women who get married, they wouldn't be the women they are without their husbands? Can you imagine if he had said that? The explosion it would be a nuclear explosion of outrage. We would all be incinerated right now. And if not dead with that, have radiation poisoning from the nuclear explosion of feminist rage if he had dared to say that. Yet he said it about himself. He said it about men. The men who get married, they wouldn't be the same men if they didn't have their wives. So my point is, if what he said about women is insulting for women, then isn't what he said to men insulting to men, but no one's insulted by that? Why is that? Because that'd be crazy to be insulted by. And when it comes to men, you're allowed to talk about the importance of family life, but for some reason, to bring it up around women at all is offensive. How dare you discuss families to women? How dare you? Now, and of course he's promoting family life to both men and women because you need both to be involved in order to have a family in the first place. So he's right. You will find more purpose and fulfillment and happiness in your family than in your job. Most jobs don't have much deeper meaning beyond the fact that you're doing it to make a living, which is fine. I mean, that in itself is important. But if you're working middle management in some corporate office somewhere, there's not a whole lot of meaning underneath that. There just isn't. It's just most jobs in the country are, again, this is not true of all of them, but most jobs in the country, or at the very least a large number of them, again, don't have much deeper meaning beyond just you're doing the job and that's why you do it. Like most people who have jobs, the reason they have the job, it's not really because they're so passionate about what they're doing. It's because they need to make a living. Which means that if you make that the center of your life, if you make it the focal point, if that is your life will inevitably have little meaning to you. It will have little meaning to you. You will struggle to find meaning in your own life. Now, finding meaning in family life is different. You can find meaning in family for its own sake. And then it also gives meaning to everything else you do. So that when you go out and do your job, now hopefully you can find meaning in your job also to some extent for its own sake. Hopefully you enjoy what you do and you feel like you're contributing to the world in some way. But whether or not you feel that way about your job, the fact is that you're doing it to provide for your family, and so that gives it even greater meaning. And this is true of men and women. But what he's saying is especially true of women, even though it's true for both. And why is that? Well, because, and if you're in the outrage mob going after Butker, I want you to listen closely here. Just listen to this. Come in a little bit closer and listen to what I'm going to say, because I need you to really try to let this sink in. Men and women are different. I'll say it again in case you lost me. Men and women are different. They are different. Okay? They're not the same. That's what different means. That's why we have different words for them. Or at least we used to. They're two different groups. They are different biological categories. And so not everything is exactly the same. So when Butker told the women in the audience that many of them are excited about getting married and having babies, it was true. Like, they applauded him. Did we not notice that? They applauded. So you might be offended on behalf of the women in the audience, but apparently many of them were perfectly fine with it. I'm sure they're very glad that you're white knighting for them, but they weren't offended. Because it's true. You know, in fact, many of them have been excited about that their whole lives, essentially. Little girls play with baby dolls. You know, little boys don't generally play with baby dolls. Girls from a young age like to pretend to be the mommy. Right? My own daughters have been sort of playing playing like they are the mommy since they were 18 months old. When they start gravitating towards the baby dolls and the kitchen play sets and all that sort of thing. And girls all over the world since time immemorial have had versions of this. Okay, you can go to ancient cultures and far-flung parts of the globe, and you'll find ancient versions of dolls and that sort of thing. Because girls have been partaking in a childlike way in these sort of domestic duties since time immemorial. My 4-year-old daughter just the other day was telling me all about her baby doll and its name and its favorite color and what it likes to eat and, all that sort of thing. My boys have never done that. My boys aren't thinking about that. Very few people have boys that are. And that's because boys and girls are different. Men and women are different. So yes, young women graduating college, unless they've been conditioned otherwise, will oftentimes desire to get married and have babies. Now, why didn't Harrison Butker, even though he had plenty of messages for men that were similar in theme, right? Why didn't Butker say the same exact thing to the young men? Why didn't he say to the young men, well, I know many of you are most excited about getting married and having kids? Because it wouldn't be true, is why he didn't say it. He didn't say it because it wouldn't be true. It wouldn't make any sense for him to say, I know many of you men here are thinking X, Y, and Z, when he knows that they're not thinking that. Because boys don't grow up, most of them, dreaming about being husbands and fathers. Most of them don't. They don't play with dolls. Boys dream about going out into the world and being explorers and adventurers and warriors. Right? This is not, despite what people on the left say, this is not social conditioning, okay? This is visceral. This is instinctive. So it's not, when I observe that my daughters are playing with dolls and my sons are outside with sticks pretending to sword fight, this is not some kind of like arrangement that I have set up because I'm so old-fashioned. This is the same dynamic that billions of people across the world and through history have observed. From the youngest of ages. We are the first society in history to try to deny these basic realities, these basic differences that everyone has always noticed. And so those young men in the audience, that's what they're thinking about. They want to go out, right? They want to go out into the world. They want to go out on an adventure. That's what they're thinking about. That's how men are wired. Men want to discover, and eventually they'll discover the joys of family life. But it's hard for men to understand that joy, even conceptually, until they experience it. It's easier for women to understand it and desire it before they've experienced it. Because again, men and women are different. Women are wired differently. When I was college graduation age, even though I didn't go to college, but when I was that age, or I would have graduated had I gone, I absolutely did not want to get married or have kids. I wasn't opposed to it in principle. You know, it just wasn't something I felt myself deeply desiring. It wasn't. There are many things that I desired. There are many ambitions and goals that I had that occupied my mind pretty much 24/7. But I didn't sit around much thinking about how great it would be to be a dad. I didn't think about it. Most young men don't. Then I met a woman who I loved and I wanted to be with her. And through my devotion to her, I discovered the joys of being a husband and then a father. And now that I am one, I can't imagine life without my kids. Now I can't get back into that. I can't even conceive of that. I cannot, put myself back in that mentality. It's sort of inconceivable. But this is the way it's always worked. Men get married and they have kids because they fall in love with a woman. And that's what you're supposed to do when you fall in love with a woman. Women get married and have kids because they want to get married and have kids. And so now when you remove that sense of duty from men, that sense that like, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I've met the woman that I love. That was sort of the easy part. But what I'm supposed to do now is I'm supposed to be a man, and now I'm supposed to take on these new duties and responsibilities. When you take that away from men, and you try to convince women not to desire family life and marriage and family life anymore, you end up with what we have now, which is people aren't having kids anymore, and everyone is miserable, and everyone's confused, and nobody knows what the hell they're doing. There's just no question at all that historically throughout the world, women have generally been wired to desire family life and to find purpose and meaning in that vocation. The question that we are asking in this society is whether that wiring can be changed at scale society-wide. Because Harrison Butker is not trying to convince the women of anything. Did you notice that? He's not saying, you should do this or that. He's saying, well, I know many of you want this, and that's a great thing to want it. Now, on the left, the message is different. What they're saying to the women is, no, you shouldn't even want that. You shouldn't want to have babies and all that kind of stuff. You should want to be a CEO. You should want this. Because there's this society-wide effort to change the inherent instinctive, both biological and spiritual wiring of men and women so that they want different things than what they have always wanted since the beginning of the human species. The question is whether that can really be changed at scale and whether we should even try to. Whether it's worth trying to change it. And I say, no, it can't really be changed, ultimately, and no, absolutely, we shouldn't try. Why? What was wrong with how it has always been since forever? Why do you need to convince women that they should want to be CEOs? Why? How does that benefit anybody? That's not to say that no woman should ever be allowed to be a CEO. But why is there this decades-long intentional effort to convince women that they should want that, even if naturally they don't? If Harrison Butker was criticizing anything, he was criticizing that. And I don't know. If you can't see that, I think it's because you don't want to see it. Thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to listen to my full podcast on the go, you can check out The Matt Walsh Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.